So this was supposed to be 10 things every software artist should know. We have become 5 things now because of lack of time. So yeah, but it's always there in the slides. Okay. So this is based on the excerpt from books. 97 things every software artist should know. It's one of the must-read book for software architects. I've also written it there. It's a very nice book. It's like based on the thoughts of software architects. They are written by the real software architects. One small intro about me. I'm a software architect working on mainly NMS, cloud management system, SDN, and things like that in Avaya. 14-5 experience. I'm also in innovation and invention. A lot of patent files. Some more are coming up in this year. I also work in user experience. I have interest in a lot of areas. You can also follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn. So first thing which we tend to forget as software architects is we are all technical guys, right? Some of these are already covered by Anand and Prakash, and there will be overlap. But one of the things is our biggest challenge may not be technical. There are many rotating. There are many rivets. There are many gears which actually make a software work. And one of the most important thing is people, right? So when you work with people as part of a project, sometimes the technical ability will not come in picture. You need to really know about how their psyche work, how they work as a team, and what are the ways you can make them more productive. Okay, and that one of the most interesting thing is we tend to forget about the most important technological innovation of our humanity called conversation. So whenever you have a problem with your team, a productivity going down, you need to have a conversation, and that's where you need to develop that skill as a software architect. Technical ability is absolutely fine, but you need to also develop that skill. So some of the things which we tend to ignore again is we try to confront. Okay, confronting is not always good because that may actually make people aloof. They may actually go away from what you wanted to actually. Your point will not be taken in a positive way. So you need to converse. Approach with the right approach, right attitude, and when you talk to your developers while working on these problems, you need to come up with a mutual agreement. Okay, this is what we are going to do, and let's sign it off, and so that when you come back to it, and then we again look at it and whether it's done or not. So this is one of the things which we need to work as a software architect. Second one is how many of you have always heard this? Do you really need X? Right? X can be anything, absolutely anything. Anything you want to use in your software can be X. X can be your software license, redundant server, offsite backup, power supplies, everything possible. And most of the time, your product manager or your technical manager will ask you, do you really need this? You said, okay, well, I think I can make it work. I have another server somewhere. I'll maybe use that. But the right answer? Yes, we do. That's the right answer. Thoughts? Any thoughts on this?
Agree.
Okay.
No, but depends, right? No, depends upon what is X.
Okay, so what do you mean by depends on what is all about is X?
Okay, so why did the sponsor ask, do we really need X? Because he's not convinced.
Right. So what I'm coming to is, as a software architect, you will actually do some sort of analysis to find out, okay, what is going to be my hardware and software requirements, right? You're not talking about people, right? When you're talking about hardware and software requirement, you're talking about things like, okay, do you need some sort of support from somebody else? You need to have some sort of other things which you have not thought of before. Anybody has not thought of. As a software architect, you will think about all those things. So when you go to your sponsor, when you go to your stakeholders, you have done first level of analysis, right? So if let's say they come back and say, okay, why don't you look into it? Our budget is very, very, it's not good this time, and you need to cut it down. So what is your first reaction? You have to always, you always make it work. You say, okay, I have this one budget, I'll somehow make it work. But what is the adverse impact?
Compromise with the quality.
Yeah, so a simple example, let's say you are running a test automation, you have a test automation system, right? For it to work properly, you need to have two systems. Now you're working with one system. If it goes down, your productivity goes down. Things like you want to do build automation, you want to do built as you check in, right? Those type of continuous integration systems. So if you have extra systems, it does not harm because it's going to benefit the project, and then sometime two months down the line, probably you will have a requirement coming in which you have never thought of, and that will work. That will help here. So you are not actually saying, okay, no, I need more than what the budget is, but your answer should be yes, we do, and you try it and you'll come to know that how well it works in your favor actually. We have tried it many times and it works very well, and we have never had a situation where at the end of release we are just left with like 3 or 4 unused system. That never happens, right?
Sometimes we face problems mostly with the timing,
Right.
estimation and refactoring.
Absolutely.
No stakeholders give enough time whenever you are done with a POC kind of thing,
Right.
and you come up with a refactoring approach to make it a proper framework.
Right.
So nobody agrees with that because they have a working system.
Right.
So they want to spend more time on that refactoring,
Right.
and they want to go for a next feature. So there is the lack where we need to negotiate.
Sure.
We need it.
Sure, absolutely. So this again, this is a very generic thing, right? So you also need to negotiate at all lots of other places, right? Because we are trained as engineer and we always talk about trade-offs. So we have to somehow we make it working. That's what we are doing all the time. But will that fit all the time in your project? That's what you need to take a conscious effort and decision to see if that works in your favor. Okay.
So there is, I'm sorry. Because it's always efficiency comes into picture because if I'm given all the resources and I'm demanding for everything, but there's always times when constraints are there.
Sure.
And if you are winning over in constraints, then you are really like efficient.
Right.
So that's also the picture. Even if the project is of low budget, you are still delivering the highest quality. You are coming up with innovation. So you are really pushing the limits. So that's something which maybe your project manager wants from you.
You know, in long run, when you are spending $1 million on your project, $1,000 is like a peanuts, right? You can get these extra servers and it's like it will just get absorbed into that cost. But if you are, because of that two servers not coming in to you on time, if you lose your time or you lose time to market, that's going to change your actual cost to $1.2 million. You know what? You understand what I'm saying, right? So that is the perspective we need to give it to our stakeholders as an architect, right? That's where we come in picture, because we tend to lose that high level picture of, okay, what does it mean to the end user? What does it mean to the stakeholder? What does it mean to the project? Sometimes it's like they say that if you $10, $20 think they should not even care out, just go ahead and approve it. But that does not happen. See, for example, software licenses, right? So normally we go for software licenses and we also go for support. Okay. Many times people say, no, why do you need support? But there may be some bugs here and there, we'll try to fix it. But fixing that bug means that you spend maybe 2-3 days of effort, and that 2-3 days of effort will mean few $100s. And the actual software support would have come for maybe half of that price, right? It's like probably, the notion is that, okay, nobody's working for 8 hours, everybody's working for like 13-14 hours. So that works out very well with that. But if you look at how we are structured in our projects, everybody's time costs money, right? And that's where we come in picture, where we say, okay, these are the hard facts, and if you look at this, if you don't do this, this is how it's going to adversely impact your project. This is a loaded statement, but you need to think about it in different perspective. Try to apply it to your context and see if it works in your context. That's very important. Next one. So this is something everybody is talking about. Everybody, a software architect is a developer. I'll say software architect is a senior developer. So one line of working code is worth 500 lines of specification. Design is a beautiful thing. Everybody likes to make a lot of interesting designs, geometry design, and things like that. Specifics are very important because they provide the pattern for building. But what goes to the customer? Not the design, not the specification. It's the actual running code, right? So that's where you have lots of things coming in picture. You have a POC coming in picture. You need to make sure that, okay, before even getting development, you know whether it's going to work or not, and try writing code. Start writing code as soon as possible. So you need to, let's say, I'll give an example from my project. So we started a project from scratch, which has 50 people. We had 3 software architects, and it's a brand new system, which is like a really big system. again, cloud computing and a lot of things coming with SDN coming in picture. So from let's say second week or third week, we actually got virtual group created. Virtual group is a group of people who come on board in a group in a virtual not a group which is under a single manager. We get people from different managers with similar skill sets and create a group, and we assign them POCs, right? And then you start working on the POCs. Within no time, within 2 to 3 weeks of time, you would know whether it's going to work or not. And that's the way we try, all checking out all the things which are not going to work. And the best part is, most of this POC code is going to be reused in the actual work. So it's very important to start coding early in any project, because that's what's going to get you money from customer, right? Specifications are very good. As a software architect, you like to create beautiful specifications, but finally it's all about running code. Other things which I would like to highlight here is sometimes you have, I think somebody talked about it in the morning, that in fact Anand, that if let's say you have issues with somebody comes and says, your design architecture is not correct, you should try to accept it. For example, you may have a situation where your developer says, this design is not working very well, it's not fitting together, I think let's revisit. And that's the time, it's time to listen to them, to your developers, to see what's wrong. Because they are the one who are implementing it, and if you listen to them, there are good chances that the design is wrong. It happens all the time, but we try to fit whatever is there in specification. We try to make a copy of that in the running code. That's not possible all the time, because we are humans, and we don't have full control on what's going to happen in the next 6 months, and we don't know each and every. There are too many running pieces, right? Running parts, and you don't have control on everything possible. You can look at it from a high-level point of view, but what's inside? So for a car from outside looks a beautiful piece of equipment, but if you open it, you'll come to know what's there inside, and you have no idea how it's working, because there are like 10,000 components inside. Questions, thoughts?
In this fast-moving world, if we don't spend a good amount of time in freezing the specification and design and making a good design,
Sure.
and lightly jumping early in the code, so chances are there like developers who have written code, they move somewhere and then.
Absolutely. So you're right, actually. So specification is very important. Specification, as I said, right, it actually gives you the pattern for building. That's very important. But what I'm trying to say is, don't get carried away by specification. That's the term. You get carried away. You try to spend too much time, effort on the specification, but and you start coding till late in the cycle. That's what I'm trying to say. So the best approach is to start small POCs. So that also helps to create those components, small usable components and things like that from day one. Okay, next one. So that's a very interesting one. So when you shortcuts are like investments. Okay, you will be paid back with a lot of interest after a release or two. Can you give me some examples of shortcuts? I gave some examples here. What shortcuts you actually use all the time in your project engine?
Software hacks. Copy paste.
Copy paste.
Morning you mentioned example of SQL Server.
Sure.
Hard coding.
Hard coding. Sure. So it will work with only that user. If that user is not there, then you're
Not writing enough tests, automated tests.
Absolutely. Because once it goes in maintenance and you have, say, one piece of, somebody is going to fix a one small issue, you need to go and test everything in, let's say, 2 weeks' time. If you have had automated test cases, you probably would have tested it in a day. Redundant code? Obviously, because everybody is trying to add shortcuts, so finally you will have the same piece of code written everywhere, right? And I think you spoke about the software licenses, right? GPL licenses are not allowed, right? So this is also a shortcut, right? Because you don't know about what is your third-party policies, third-party tools which you should use or not use. Copy and paste. Go to a forum. Sorry. The best site which can from where you can copy and paste the code is like Stack Overflow and the server side and things like that, right? Stack Overflow, what happens is somebody posts a code. That code can be from a different system, which does not fall under your licensing policies. So I'll give an example of how this GPL code works. So there's something called viral infection. So viral infection says that if you use even one single line of GPL code, your entire code becomes GPL. So your code does not remain closed source anymore, it has to be open source. And we have seen these type of issues where somebody copy and pasted code 2 weeks before the general availability, GA, the term which we used to, when we are going to ship it outside, we found this using a tool which goes and scans. You have to rewrite the code and spin the system, and it took a lot of effort. And if you have gone for, let's say, LGPL or Apache or MIT or BSD, that problem will not happen. So this is one of the important aspects of, writing original code always pays off instead of copy and pasting. That's one example.
What is that tool?
What's that?
What is that tool to direct?
So we have a tie-up with a company called Black Duck, and they have tools called Protex, which actually goes through your source code and actually scans it. But I think there are open source code tools as well, but these are pretty costly. We have subscription, like company-wide subscription. You can also think about it. So you just have to give a SVN repository details, and that's about it. And it will go and scan everything. It has some 3 million. It actually crawls through the entire internet and finds out where you have used it. It's pretty interesting. So that's about.
Also include libraries.
Sure, it does. So say for example Maven, right? If you do Maven build, right? So you have .m2 repository, .m2 directory, right? So you just submit that as well as your Subversion repository, and it scans through it and finds out if you have used anything which is as per the licenses. Last one. So we are warriors. We have our own weapons. Our weapons are our IDs, our tools, Visio, UML, anything you think of which can help you make your point clear to the team and to the project, right? So things are important from how how do you choose your weapons, how do you choose your tools? That's very important. Some tools are quite proven, and what happens is every day you have a new tool coming in, and your team, somebody will say, okay, why don't you use this? But how do you know if it's going to work? So that's what I'm saying is you have to choose your tool carefully. You choose your weapon carefully, and when you are quite accustomed to that, try to don't relinquish it without any proper reasoning. But it's very important to also keep you up to date with the new tools and new weapons of choice which other architects are using, and that's where we have a meetup like this where we can learn from each other's experience, and that will help you to keep the right balance between the proven tools and things which are coming up. So any thoughts?
There are some softwares like Sublime Text. They are free to use on evaluation basis, and people call it open source. Can we use it in this landscape without paying?
So okay, maybe I can take that question because I'm also working in a lot of. I'm part of this core committee which takes care of all this third party and licensing. So there are different distinctions between different sort of software: open source, freeware, closed source, shareware. Okay. Open source is something which you can take it to you can use it and modify it at your will. Nobody is going to ask you for money. Freeware is something which you can use, but you cannot modify the source code. Okay, so for example, JRE is no more open source after going to Oracle. JRE used to be completely open source, it's no more open source. Shareware, you should avoid it. Shareware is completely, there are lots of other things, shareware, nagware, crapware, there are lots of other terms. they are real terms actually. Okay, so these things are very, very dangerous for your project. And closed source, you have to pay money. So shareware is a big no for any project. Open source is completely safe. freeware is safe to an extent, and if you have software which are under Apache, MIT, BSD, LGPL, they are good. That's the shortest definition I think of. But you can just talk to me if you need one.
So you mentioned open source, you don't have to pay money. I don't think that is a definition.
No, open source.
There are licenses where you use open source software for commercial purpose, you have to pay money.
Yeah. So then again, there are riders, right? So if you are using it for, so there are different riders there. So some of the guys say that till the time you maintain the copyright notice, you don't have to pay. Okay. Some guys say, okay, if you use it in your commercial purposes, you need to pay us a very small token amount, just very, very small. Some guys say, okay, you can use it and you do whatever you want with this. For example, Apache. Apache will not bother if you do whatever you want with that. You can go and modify, you can change your own, make your own custom library, nobody is going to care about it. So different, I mean, it's a short definition, but again, there are lots of riders there which you need to look at.
I just wanted to point out that maybe
Sure.
money may not be the definition for that, but yeah, it's open to use.
Absolutely.
A lot of them are there which use for commercial purpose, you have to.
Absolutely, thanks for that. So yeah, and again, free is a very big misnomer. Free is not always free. So you need to you need to look at that as well. So that ends my talk.